After they froze the family trust, the groom's father called me to fly with him on his private jet. I never imagined those words would ever come out of my mouth. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I'd share. And if you, for just a second, feel like this sounds familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It'll help me to keep unburdening myself. My name is Lucy. I'm 59 years old, a widow for the last 3 months, and until recently, I thought I knew my family. I lived in a 2-story house in the suburbs of Phoenix, with adobe walls painted an ochre yellow that my late husband, Arthur, had chosen because he said it reminded him of the sunflowers from his childhood. The central patio always smelled of jasmine and damp earth, and in the mornings the chirping of sparrows mixed with the distant rumble of garbage trucks making their way through the neighborhood. It was a Tuesday. I remember because on Tuesdays I always made my slow-cooked chili for dinner, a tradition I kept even after Arthur died of a massive heart attack while pruning the bougainvillea in the garden. That day, like every day since the funeral, I got up at 6 in the morning, put on my navy blue cotton robe, the same one I'd been wearing for 15 years, and walked barefoot to the kitchen to brew coffee in the old percolator that had belonged to my mother. The silence of the house wrapped around me like a heavy blanket. There were no more hurried footsteps of Arthur looking for his keys, no more of his voice humming old country tunes while he shaved, just my own movements, the clink of the spoon against the mug, the hiss of the gas stove lighting up, the creaking of my knees as I bent down to get the plates from the lower cabinet. I was stirring my coffee when I heard the front gate open, familiar steps on the patio tiles. My heart lifted for the first time in weeks. "Mom, we need to talk," said Andrew, my only son, appearing in the kitchen doorway with his wife, Paige, clinging to his arm like possessive ivy. Paige was wearing a tight coral-colored dress that highlighted her artificially tanned skin and those high heels that always clattered against the floor like little hammers. Her platinum blonde hair was pulled back into a perfect bun, without a single strand out of place. She smelled of expensive perfume, the kind they sell in the exclusive boutiques at Scottsdale Fashion Square. "Good morning, you two. Coffee? I just made a fresh pot," I said, trying to sound cheerful, though something in their expressions made a knot form in my stomach. "No, thanks, Lucy," Paige replied with that forced smile she always wore when she had to talk to me, as if the muscles in her face were in pain. "Actually, we'd prefer it if you sat down. We need to discuss some important things." I sat in my usual chair, the wicker one Arthur had bought me in Old Town Scottsdale on our first wedding anniversary. From there I could see the Farmer's Almanac calendar hanging on the wall, with yesterday's date circled in red. Our 32nd wedding anniversary, a day I had spent in complete solitude. Andrew cleared his throat, avoiding my gaze. My son, who as a little boy used to tell me, "Mommy, when I grow up, I'm going to buy you a house even prettier than this one," now had trembling hands and a sweaty brow. "Mom, the financial situation is complicated," he began, nervously fidgeting with his wedding ring. "With Dad's funeral expenses, the paperwork for the will, and, well, Paige and I have been reviewing the family finances." Paige cut him off with the authority of someone used to taking charge. "We can't keep supporting you, Lucy. It's not fair to anyone." Her words hit me like a bucket of ice water. The coffee mug slipped from my hands and shattered on the tile floor, spilling the dark liquid around my bare feet. "Supporting me?" I whispered, not understanding. "But this house belonged to Arthur and me." "Belonged," Paige cut me off sharply, crossing her arms. "Now it belongs to my husband, and I am his wife. And in this house, there's no longer room for an elderly woman with no income and a bunch of aches and pains." The world tilted slightly. I grabbed the edge of the table to keep from falling. Aches and pains? An elderly woman? Me, who had nursed Arthur through his final illness without sleeping, who had raised Andrew practically on my own while his father built the construction supply business that had made them prosperous. "But I helped pay for this house. I worked at the stationery store for 20 years to—" "That was a long time ago," Paige interrupted again, examining her fuchsia-colored nails. "Circumstances have changed. Andrew has a family to support. The kids need space, stability, and frankly, we can't afford any additional expenses." I looked at my son, searching his eyes for a trace of the boy who used to defend me when his father came home drunk and yelling. But Andrew just stared at the floor, his jaw tight and his fists clenched on his knees. "Andrew?" I murmured. "Do you think this too?" He glanced up for just a second, and what I saw there broke my soul. Shame mixed with a coldness I didn't recognize. "Mom, it's for the best," he said in a hoarse voice. "We've thought about options. There are some very nice senior living facilities in the city, with medical care, activities." "Are you kicking me out of my own house?" The words came out like a strangled cry. Paige sighed with impatience, as if explaining something obvious to a stubborn child. "Don't be dramatic, Lucy. We're offering you a place in the laundry room, temporarily, until we can figure out the permanent situation." The laundry room, a tiny windowless space between the washing machine and the storage closet, which smelled perpetually of detergent and dampness. That's where they wanted to put me. Like an old pet that was no longer useful but that they didn't have the heart to abandon on the street. "You can take the essentials," Paige continued. "A folding cot, some clothes. Nothing more. We need the space in your bedroom for Andrew's home office. Business requires concentration and privacy." Andrew nodded without looking at me. My son. My only son. The baby I nursed for months when he was born premature, and the doctors said he wouldn't survive. The boy who cried in my arms for weeks when his first love left him. The young man who asked me to teach him how to cook to impress Paige when they started dating. I stood up slowly, feeling as if my legs were made of jelly. The pieces of the broken mug crunched under my feet, but the physical pain was nothing compared to what I felt in my chest. "Okay," I murmured. "Okay?" Paige smiled triumphantly. "Perfect. Then we can start moving your things this afternoon." I left the kitchen without another word. I walked up the stairs to my bedroom, the room I had shared with Arthur for over 3 decades. The peach-colored walls, the quilt my mother had knitted, the wooden dresser where I kept the love letters Arthur wrote to me when we were dating. I sat on the bed and picked up our wedding photograph from the nightstand. There we were, young and smiling, he in his brown suit with wide lapels, and me in the ivory satin dress that had cost 3 months of my salary. Behind us, our parents and siblings, all gone now. Only Andrew and I were left. And now, he had abandoned me too. That night, in the laundry room, lying on a thin mattress that hurt my back, I heard Paige and Andrew talking in the living room. "It was about time we set some boundaries," she was saying. "Your mother has always been very dependent. This will be good for her." "I hope you're right," he replied, his voice tired. "Of course I'm right. Besides, this way we can use the savings your father left without her watching every penny." I covered my mouth with the blanket to keep from screaming. That's when I knew this wasn't just about space or money. It was about control, about erasing me completely from my own life. The following days blurred into a routine I never imagined I'd live in my own home. I became the silent shadow who took care of everything, while Paige rearranged my home as if she were the new owner of a hotel she had just bought at a foreclosure auction. My new routine started at 5:30 in the morning. The alarm clock I had placed in the laundry room sounded like an emergency siren in the tiny space. I would get up, numb from the thin mattress, dress in silence so as not to wake anyone, and tiptoe to the kitchen to prepare the breakfast Paige had specified the night before. "Andrew's eggs have to be soft-boiled, not hard," she had warned me on the second day. "And the toast, golden brown but not burnt. The kids eat cereal, but if there's no fresh milk, don't give me any excuses. And my coffee, you know I don't like percolator coffee. Buy decaf instant, the good brand." She had handed me a typewritten list, as if I were a new employee who needed detailed instructions. The list included schedules: breakfast ready at 7 sharp, lunch served at 2:30, dinner prepared but not served at 8 because Paige preferred to serve it herself when Andrew gets home from work. It also listed my new responsibilities: wash and iron all the family's clothes, clean the bathrooms daily, vacuum the carpets every other day, keep the garden watered and pruned, pick up the children from school on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and do the grocery shopping with the list Paige would give me every Monday. At the bottom of the list, in smaller print, she had added, "Remember that the family's personal space must be respected. Do not enter the bedrooms without prior authorization." The bedrooms. My former room, where I had slept next to Arthur for 32 years, now had a sign on the door that said, "Private office, do not disturb." Paige had a new lock installed. I didn't have a key. The first week was a hell of adjustment. My knees, which already bothered me from arthritis, now ached constantly from being on my feet from 5:30 in the morning until 10 at night. My hands, which had tenderly cared for the garden plants for decades, were now rough and cracked from the detergents and cleaning products Paige insisted on using. "Lucy, the windows are dirty again," Paige would tell me every morning, pointing to windows I had cleaned the day before. "See those streaks? It's because you're not using enough product. And that wall, when was the last time you washed it?" Her criticisms arrived punctually with breakfast, as if they were part of the morning ritual. I would serve the soft-boiled eggs, the golden brown toast, the decaf coffee in the porcelain cup she had brought from her house, and wait for the first reproach of the day. "And that rice from yesterday? It was like glue," she yelled one afternoon when I got home from picking up the kids from school, my grandchildren Dylan and Sophie, aged 8 and 6 respectively. "Are you trying to ruin our dinner with Andrew's bosses? They'll think we don't know how to live decently." The children looked at me with those big, sad eyes that broke my heart. Dylan, the older one, approached me stealthily while Paige was on the phone with a friend, complaining about how hard it is to find reliable domestic help these days. "Grandma, why don't you come and sleep with us anymore, like you did when Grandpa got sick?" he whispered, tugging at my skirt. I had no answer. How could I explain to an 8-year-old boy that his own father had kicked me out of my bedroom? How could I tell him that the woman he called Mommy Paige treated me like an unpaid servant? "It's complicated, sweetie," I said, kneeling to be at his level. "Sometimes adults have to make difficult changes." "But you're still our grandma, right?" asked Sophie, the little one, hugging me with her thin arms. "Always, my love. I'll always be your grandma." But I didn't feel like one anymore. I felt like a stranger living in my own house, taking care of my own grandchildren, as if they were the children of strangers I was barely allowed to speak to. One afternoon, while I was washing the dishes after lunch, I heard Paige talking on the phone in the living room. Her voice carried clearly into the kitchen, and what I heard sent a chill down my spine. "It's like having a free maid, I swear," she was telling someone, laughing. "You just have to put up with her sad face and her old lady smell. But she does everything I ask, and it doesn't cost me a penny." I hid in the pantry, between the sacks of beans and the canned goods that I myself had organized over the years, and cried like an orphan. Tears fell onto the cold tiles as I pressed a kitchen towel against my mouth to stifle the sound. Her old lady smell. The words burned inside me. Me, who bathed religiously every morning with the oatmeal soap I'd used my whole life, who used powder after drying off, who kept my clothes clean and ironed even if they were old. To Paige, I was just an unpleasant object to be tolerated in exchange for free services. That night, lying in the laundry room, I heard Andrew and Paige arguing in their bedroom. Their voices were muffled through the walls, but I could make out a few phrases. "I don't know if this is right, Paige," my son was saying. "She's my mother. The house was hers too." "Was? Andrew, wake up. Your mother doesn't have anything in her name. Your father left everything in a trust until the legal paperwork is sorted out. In the meantime, you're the administrator. You decide." "But she worked her whole life for this." "For this, nothing. She worked to support you guys while your father built the business. The business that is now yours. The house that is now yours. The money that is now yours. Or would you rather keep supporting a woman who no longer produces anything?" There was a long silence. Then, Andrew's voice quieter. "You're right. It's just, sometimes I feel guilty. Guilt is a luxury we can't afford. We have 2 children to raise, a house to maintain, a future to secure. Your mother has already lived her life, as if at 59, I was an old piece of furniture to be stored in the closet, until they decided whether to take it to the dump." The next morning, Paige intercepted me in the kitchen before I could start preparing breakfast. "Lucy, we need to talk about some additional rules," she said, sitting at the table like a boss talking to her staff. "First, no more chatting with the kids for hours. They have homework and activities. You have obligations. Second, when we have guests, especially Andrew's work colleagues. You stay in the kitchen or in your room. We don't want people to think that, well, that our family situation is irregular. Irregular. That word hurt more than all the others combined. I, who had been the exemplary wife, the devoted mother, the respectful daughter-in-law to Arthur's parents until they died, was now an irregularity that had to be hidden when important guests came over. And what if the children ask why I can't be with you? I said, feeling my voice tremble. You'll tell them you're busy. That adults have adult conversations. They'll understand. But the children didn't understand. Dylan especially started asking me every day why I didn't eat with them anymore, why I couldn't help him with his homework at the dining room table like before, why I had to go to my room when people came to the house. "Grandma, did you do something bad?" he asked me one day while I was hanging laundry in the backyard. The question pierced me like a knife. What had I done wrong? Loved too much? Trusted blindly? Believed that family meant something more than financial convenience? "No, sweetie," I replied, pinning one of his school uniform shirts to the line. Sometimes adults make decisions that children don't understand. But that doesn't mean anyone did anything wrong. Then why does Mommy Page say you're a burden? The clothespins fell from my hands. Dylan had heard. My 8-year-old grandson had heard his stepmother call me a burden. "When did she say that, Dylan?" "Yesterday, when she was on the phone. She told someone you were a burden, but they couldn't just throw you out on the street because people would talk badly about Dad." I sat down on the small plastic stool I used to reach the high clothesline, and I hugged my grandson. His dark little head rested on my shoulder, and I felt his tears wet my blouse. "Grandma, I don't want you to be a burden. I love you, and I love you too, sweetie. More than anything in the world." But that night, lying on my folding cot amidst the smell of detergent and fabric softener, I knew I had to make a decision. I couldn't go on living like this, humiliating myself daily, watching my grandchildren get more confused every day, feeling my own dignity evaporate drop by drop. The last straw came a week later, when Paige organized a dinner party to entertain Andrew's partners from the construction firm. The dinner was on a Friday night. Paige had been preparing all week as if she were receiving the president himself. She hired a catering company to bring in round tables, fine linens, and centerpieces with imported flowers that cost more than my monthly salary from the stationery store. "Lucy, tonight is very important for Andrew's future," she told me as she supervised the waiters setting up the tables in the garden. "Mr. Mendoza will be here with his wife, and also the Japanese partners from the firm. There can be no mistakes." She handed me a new list, this time with specific instructions for the evening. I was to keep the kitchen spotless, be available in case the waiters needed anything, but above all, remain invisible. "If anyone asks who you are, you say you're the housekeeper, nothing more." The housekeeper. In my own home. That afternoon, while ironing the white shirt Andrew would wear for the dinner, I found a business card in the pocket that said, "Golden Years Senior Living, Comprehensive Care for Seniors." On the back, in Paige's handwriting, was a note. "Ask about full monthly package." My hands trembled so much that the iron slipped and burned the shirt sleeve. The smoke of scorched cotton filled the laundry room as I stared at the card as if it were a death sentence. Golden Years. I'd driven past it several times on my way to the medical center for my checkups. It was a gray building with high fences and small windows where families left their elderly relatives when they no longer wanted them at home. Paige was already researching how to get rid of me for good. I hid the card in my apron pocket and finished ironing the shirt, fixing the burn as best I could. Andrew wouldn't notice. He never paid attention to such details. At 7 o'clock, the first guests arrived. From the small window of the laundry room, I could see the garden illuminated with colorful lights, the elegant tables, the women in expensive dresses, and the men in impeccable suits. Paige looked radiant in a tight black dress and jewelry I hadn't seen before. Andrew, at her side, smiled and greeted everyone like the perfect host. I was in the kitchen, coordinating with the waiters on drink service, when I heard a voice I didn't recognize. "Excuse me, ma'am, could you tell me where the restroom is?" I turned around and saw an elegant older man with silver hair and kind eyes. He was wearing a navy blue suit and a silk tie that shimmered under the kitchen lights. "Of course, sir. Out of here. First hallway on the right, Second door. Thank you, and forgive my curiosity, but aren't you the owner of this house? The question caught me by surprise. For a second, I didn't know what to say. I'm the housekeeper, I mumbled, repeating the words Paige had made me memorize. The man looked at me with a strange expression, as if something didn't add up. The housekeeper? But you have the same last name as the host. On the guest list, you're listed as Lucy Morrison, widow of Arthur Morrison, the same Arthur Morrison my father did business with for years. My heart stopped. This man knew my husband. You knew Arthur? I'm Brian Sterling. He extended his hand politely. My father is George Sterling from the Sterling Real Estate Group. He and Mr. Morrison were partners on several projects. When my father heard he had passed away, he wanted to come and offer his condolences personally, but he couldn't due to health issues. That's why I came in his place. Brian. The name sounded familiar. Arthur had mentioned the Sterlings several times, always with respect and affection. Your husband was a very honorable man, Brian continued. My father always said that Arthur Morrison's word was his bond, and he spoke very highly of you as well. He said you were an exceptional woman, that you had been the pillar of the Morrison family. Tears welled up in my eyes. It had been months since anyone had spoken of me as if I were a valuable person. Thank you so much, sir. Arthur thought very highly of you all as well. And could you explain to me why the widow of Arthur Morrison is working as a housekeeper in what, as I understand it, was her own home? Before I could answer, Paige swept into the kitchen like a storm. Ah, Mr. Sterling, I was looking for you, she said with her most radiant smile. Did you get lost? Dinner is about to be served. I wasn't lost, Mrs. Morrison. I was getting to know Mrs. Morrison, Brian said, gesturing toward me. An extraordinary woman, according to what my father told me. Paige shot me a murderous look, and then turned back to Brian with a forced laugh. Oh, Mr. Sterling, what a mix-up. This is Lucy, our housekeeper. I suppose you got confused because, well, sometimes older people look alike, don't they? I wasn't confused, Brian said in a firm voice. I know perfectly well who Mrs. Morrison is. The question is, why is she working as a domestic employee in her own house? The silence that followed was deafening. Paige opened and closed her mouth like a fish out of water, while I stood frozen, not knowing what to do. The situation is complicated, Paige stammered. After Mr. Morrison's death, there were some legal problems, issues with the will. What kind of legal problems? Brian insisted. Because according to the public records I consulted before coming, all of Arthur Morrison's properties are in the name of his widow, Lucy Morrison. I see no legal impediment for her to be treated as the owner that she is. Paige turned pale. I had never seen her so flustered. Mr. Sterling, I think there's a misunderstanding. You are the ones who misunderstand, Brian said, looking directly at me. Mrs. Morrison, would you mind joining me for a moment? I'd like to introduce you to my fiancée. She's in the garden and would love to meet the widow of Mr. Morrison. I looked at Paige, who was glaring at me, then at Brian, who was smiling with genuine kindness. I don't think that would be appropriate. I'm working, and— You are not working, Brian interrupted. You are in your home, receiving your son's guests. As it should be. He gently took the apron from my hands and offered me his arm. Shall we? We walked toward the garden, leaving Paige in the kitchen, probably planning how to explain to Andrew what had just happened. The guests looked at us with curiosity as Brian introduced me as Mrs. Lucy Morrison, widow of the respected businessman Arthur Morrison and owner of this beautiful home. Brian's fiancée, a sweet young woman named Andrea, greeted me with such warmth that for a moment I forgot the humiliation of the past few months. Brian has told me so much about his father's friendship with your husband, she said. He must have been an extraordinary man. He was, I whispered, feeling for the first time in months like a person worthy of conversation. But the peace didn't last long. Andrew approached with a forced smile and a panicked expression. Mom, what are you doing out here? The waiters need help in the kitchen. Your mother is exactly where she should be, Brian said with authority. Receiving the guests in her home. It's just that there's a small misunderstanding, Andrew stammered. My mother, she prefers to stay in the kitchen. She likes to feel useful. Brian looked at him with an expression that tolerated no lies. Young man, I've known your father for many years. I know perfectly well what the financial and legal situation of this family was, and I can assure you there is no reason for Arthur Morrison's widow to be treated like a domestic employee. At that moment, Paige appeared, having recovered from the initial shock with a venomous smile. Mr. Sterling, I think you're causing an uncomfortable situation. The Morrison family has its own dynamics, and frankly, I don't think they are the business of outsiders. Outsiders? Brian drew himself up to his full height. My family and the Morrisons have been business partners for over 20 years. Mr. Morrison knew me since I was a teenager, and he would never have allowed his wife to be treated this way. Mr. Morrison is no longer here to give his opinion? Paige replied coldly. And things have changed. Yes, they have changed, Brian said, taking my hand, and not for the better. He turned to the rest of the guests and raised his wine glass. I'd like to make a toast, he said in a loud voice, to the memory of Arthur Morrison, a man of integrity who built a solid legacy for his family, and to his widow, Mrs. Lucy Morrison, whose dignity and strength continue to be an example to all who knew her. The guests raised their glasses, confused, but following protocol. Paige and Andrew stood frozen, glasses in hand, but did not toast. That night, after the guests had left, Andrew found me in the laundry room. Mom, we need to talk. His voice sounded different, less certain, almost scared. What do you want to talk about, son? That man, Brian Sterling, what exactly did he say to you? For the first time in months, I saw fear in my son's eyes. And for the first time in months, I felt that maybe I had more power than I had believed. What did he say to me about what, Andrew? I asked, noticing how his hands trembled as he closed the laundry room door behind him. My son sat on the edge of my folding cot, sinking into the thin mattress that groaned under his weight. In the yellow light of the bare bulb hanging from the ceiling, his face looked haggard, with deep dark circles I hadn't noticed before. Mom, that man, Brian, did he say anything to you about Dad? About the business? About the will? There was something in his voice I hadn't heard since he was a boy and had broken my mother's favorite vase. That mix of guilt and terror that liars have when they feel they're about to be found out. He told me his father and your dad were partners, that they knew me. Why? Is there something you haven't told me? Andrew ran his hands through his hair, a nervous habit he'd inherited from Arthur. It's complicated, Mom. The will papers, they're still in probate. There are a lot of things to review, a lot of paperwork. What paperwork, Andrew? Your father told me several times that everything was in order, that there would be no problems. What aren't you telling me? He was silent for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Outside, I could hear Paige yelling at the catering staff as they collected the tables and chairs from the garden. Mom, when Dad died, there were some debts, big debts, and the lawyer told us the best thing to do was to freeze the accounts until everything was resolved. What debts? Arthur never told me about any major debts. Debts from the construction company. Problems with some projects. Nothing serious, but complicated. His eyes couldn't meet mine. Arthur always said Andrew was a terrible liar as a child, and apparently, he hadn't improved with age. Andrew, look me in the eye and tell me the truth. I am telling you the truth, Mom. Then explain to me why Brian Sterling says that all the properties are in my name. Explain to me why he seems to know more about my legal situation than I do. Andrew stood up abruptly, as if the bed were burning him. That man doesn't know anything. He just came here to cause trouble. Dad and his father had some business together, yes, but that doesn't make him an expert on our family affairs. But he said, I don't care what he said, he shouted, then immediately lowered his voice, realizing Paige might hear him. Mom, trust me. I'm your son. Everything I'm doing is to protect you. Protect me from what? From legal complications. From financial problems. From having to worry about things you don't understand. Things you don't understand. As if I were a child incapable of managing my own life. Andrew, I managed this household's finances for 30 years. I helped your dad with the company's books when he was just starting out. I am not the useless woman Paige thinks I am. That's not it, Mom. It's just, things are different now. More complicated. That night, after Andrew went to his room, I lay awake thinking about everything that had happened. Brian had planted a seed of doubt that I couldn't ignore. If everything was as legal and transparent as Andrew and Paige claimed, why had they gotten so nervous? Why couldn't Andrew look me in the eye when he talked about the will? At 3 a.m, I made a decision. I got up quietly, got dressed, and went out to the garden. The night was cool, with the scent of jasmine floating in the damp air. I walked to the small office Arthur had built at the back of the yard, where he kept his important documents. The door had a simple lock that could be opened with a homemade pick Arthur had taught me to make years ago when he got locked out of his own office. "Just in case you ever need to get in and I'm not around," he had said, laughing. I never imagined I would need it under these circumstances. The office smelled of old leather and tobacco, even though Arthur had quit smoking more than 10 years ago. His accounting books were neatly arranged on the desk, next to a photo of us on our wedding day, and another of Andrew at his college graduation. I searched the file cabinets until I found the folder labeled Will and Legal Documents. Inside were copies of everything: the original will, property deeds, bank statements, the construction company's documents. What I read took my breath away. All the properties were in my name, just as Brian had said. The house, the company, the bank accounts, the investments, everything. Arthur had been meticulous in securing my future. The will was clear. In the event of his death, I would inherit 70% of everything, and Andrew the remaining 30%. But there was something else. A handwritten note from Arthur, dated just a month before his death. "Lucy, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer with you. I want you to know that everything we built is in your name because I trust your judgment more than anyone's. Andrew is a good son, but Paige has too much influence over him. Don't let them convince you that you have no rights. This house is yours. The money is yours. The company is yours. You decide what to do with it all. I love you, and I hope you'll be happy. Arthur." Tears streamed down my face as I read my dead husband's words. He had foreseen exactly what was happening. He had tried to protect me even from the grave. I made copies of all the important documents on the small copier Arthur used for the office and put the originals back in their place. Then I returned to the laundry room with the copies hidden in my robe. The next morning, while preparing breakfast, I heard Paige on the phone in the living room. "Yes, it was a total disaster," she was telling someone. "That meddler Sterling almost ruined the whole plan. Andrew is a nervous wreck. He says maybe we should speed things up with the nursing home before the old woman figures anything out." I dropped the coffee mug I was pouring. "No, I don't think she knows anything," Paige continued. "But Brian Sterling does. And if he starts asking questions, or worse, if he tells Lucy to check the original papers, our little side hustle is over." Our little side hustle. That's what she called stealing my inheritance. How do we fix it? Easy. Tomorrow we'll talk to the director of Golden Years. We'll tell him Lucy is starting to show signs of dementia, that it's dangerous for her to live alone. Once she's admitted, it will be much easier for Andrew to take legal control of everything. My hands trembled so much I had to lean on the counter to keep from falling. The documents. The lawyer already reviewed them. They're perfectly forged. No one will notice that we moved the dates and changed a few names. As long as the old woman doesn't see the originals, there's no problem. Forged documents. They had forged Arthur's will to steal my inheritance. "Of course I love her," Paige went on sarcastically. "I love her so much that I'm willing to keep her in the best nursing home in Phoenix. With my own money. Well, with the money that will soon be ours." I left the kitchen without a sound and locked myself in the laundry room. I took out the copies of the real documents I had found the night before and compared them with the versions Andrew had shown me weeks ago when I asked about the will. It was true. The documents my son had shown me were forgeries. Dates changed, clauses altered, my name removed as the primary heir. My own son had been robbing me. That afternoon, when Andrew came home from work, I was waiting for him in the main living room. I no longer cared if Paige got upset seeing me there. "We need to talk, Andrew. And this time, I want the truth." "Mom, I already told you that. Are these the will documents you showed me last week?" I placed the forged copies on the coffee table. "Yes. Those are them. And are these the original documents your father left filed in his office? I placed the real copies next to them. Andrew turned white as a sheet. Mom, I can explain. Explain how my name magically disappears from the properties in your version. Explain how the dates change. Explain how my husband, who loved me for 32 years, suddenly decided to leave me with nothing. Andrew collapsed onto the sofa, his head in his hands. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You're sorry? Are you sorry you tried to steal my house? Are you sorry you treated me like a servant in my own home? Are you sorry you planned to put me in a nursing home so I wouldn't discover your theft? How do you know about the nursing home? I heard your wife on the phone. The little side hustle, she called it. Paige appeared in the living room just then, as if she'd been listening behind the door. Lucy, I don't know what you think you heard, but I heard that you forged my husband's will to steal my inheritance. I heard that you plan to have me committed to gain full control of my money. I heard that this has all been a sham since the day Arthur died. Paige and Andrew looked at each other, and in that glance, I saw the confirmation of everything I had discovered. Mom, we just wanted to protect you, Andrew mumbled. Protect me? I laughed, but it was a bitter, humorless laugh. Is robbing and humiliating me protecting me? The money. It's a lot of money, Mom. You don't know how to handle it. You could get scammed. People could take advantage of you. Like you two took advantage of me. The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time in months, I was in control of the conversation. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to the bank, I told them, in a voice I didn't recognize as my own, firm and determined. I'm going to see a lawyer, and I'm going to find out exactly what else you've been hiding from me. Mom, please. No, Andrew. It's over. The lies are over. The humiliation is over. The theft is over. Tomorrow, I'm taking back what's mine. That night, lying on my folding cot for the last time, I knew something fundamental had changed in me. I was no longer the helpless, confused widow I had been for months. I was Lucy Morrison, the owner of this house, the heir to Arthur's estate, the woman who had worked for 30 years to build this life, and no one, not even my own son, was going to steal what was mine. At 8 o'clock the next morning, I was standing in front of the Bank of America on Central Avenue, waiting for the doors to open. I was wearing my best navy blue blouse, the gray skirt that had been my office uniform for so many years, and the black leather shoes Arthur had given me for our last anniversary. In my purse, I had all the original documents and my driver's license. For the first time in months, I felt like myself. The bank manager, Ms. Carmen Vasquez, greeted me with the professional courtesy reserved for important clients. She was a woman in her 40s, with elegant glasses and a tailored suit that inspired confidence. Mrs. Morrison, I'm very sorry for the loss of your husband, she said, as she reviewed the documents I presented. Mr. Morrison was one of our most respected clients. How can I help you today? I need to review the status of all the accounts that were in my husband's name, and I want to understand why I haven't had access to them since he died. Carmen typed something into her computer, frowned, and typed again. Mrs. Morrison, according to our records, you have been the sole owner of all these accounts for over 10 years. Your husband registered you as the sole beneficiary and granted you full power of attorney in 2013. Then why was I told the accounts were frozen? They aren't frozen. In fact, there have been significant movements in recent weeks. Carmen showed me the screen. Large withdrawals, transfers. Did you authorize these transactions? My blood ran cold. On the screen, I saw transfers for hundreds of thousands of dollars, all dated after Arthur's death, all authorized with a signature that looked like mine but that I had never made. No, I didn't authorize any of this. Carmen looked at me with growing concern. Mrs. Morrison, I'm afraid this appears to be a case of bank fraud. Do you have any idea who might have access to your personal documents? The image of Andrew filling out papers at the dining room table after the funeral flashed in my mind. All those forms he had asked me to sign for the legal paperwork. My son, I whispered. My son has copies of all my documents. Over the next 2 hours, Carmen and I pieced together the whole story. Andrew had used the signatures I'd put on the supposed legal documents to make transfers to a new account he had opened in his name. He had systematically emptied the savings accounts, taken money from the investments, and even mortgaged properties using forged documents. The total amount taken is approximately $2.8 million, Carmen informed me. But I have good news. Since you are the sole legal owner of the accounts, we can reverse all these transactions. However, we will need to file a fraud report with the authorities. A report? Against my son? Mrs. Morrison, I understand this is a very difficult situation, but we are talking about a serious crime. Your son committed fraud, forgery, and embezzlement. If you don't file a report, he could continue to use your documents for more fraudulent transactions. I sat in silence for several minutes, processing the magnitude of what I was discovering. They hadn't just stolen my dignity and my home. They had stolen my financial future. How much is left in the accounts? After the fraudulent transactions, approximately $300,000 across all accounts. But as I said, we can recover everything else. $300,000, a fortune for most people, but a fraction of what Arthur and I had saved over decades of work. I want to freeze all the accounts immediately, I told her. And I want to change all the passwords and access codes. No one else should be able to touch that money. Of course. I also recommend that you change the locks on your house and review all the legal documents you have on file. If your son had access to your bank papers, it's likely he also has copies of other important things. An hour later, I left the bank with an envelope full of documents, police report numbers, and a new debit card that only I knew about. For the first time in months, I had money in my hands. Money that was mine, that no one could take from me, that no one could use to control me. My first stop was Mr. Thomas's locksmith shop, the same man who had installed the original locks on my house 15 years ago. He was an older man with a white mustache and expert hands, who had always been kind to me. "Mrs. Morrison, how are you?" "So sorry to hear about Mr. Morrison. He was a good man. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. I need you to change all the locks on the house. All of them. The main doors, the garden gates, the office, everything. Was there some kind of security problem?" "Yes," I said simply. "A very serious security problem." While Mr. Thomas worked on the locks, I called a lawyer Carmen had recommended. Mr. Richard Mendoza had an office in downtown Phoenix, in one of those restored historic buildings that inspired trust and tradition. "Mrs. Morrison, I've reviewed the documents you faxed over from the bank," he said over the phone. "Your case is very clear-cut. Not only do you have the right to recover all the stolen money, but you can also sue for civil damages. And of course, there's the criminal matter." "What does that mean exactly?" "It means your son could face between 5 and 12 years in prison for aggravated fraud and forgery. It's a federal offense, Mrs. Morrison. Very serious. Prison. My son in prison." The thought turned my stomach, but it also filled me with a strange satisfaction. For months, I had allowed them to humiliate me, to rob me, to treat me like trash. Now I had the power to make them pay for everything they had done. "How long do I have to decide whether to press criminal charges?" "Legally, you have up to 6 years to file the complaint, but I recommend you act soon. The more time that passes, the harder it will be to recover the money they've already spent." At 4 in the afternoon, I returned home with new keys and a sense of power I hadn't felt in years. Mr. Thomas had done a perfect job. The shiny new locks contrasted with the old wood of the doors, like symbols of a new beginning. Andrew and Paige arrived at 5:30, just like every day. I heard them from the kitchen, trying to open the front door. "What the hell?" I heard Paige shout. "Why isn't the key working?" They banged on the door loudly. Mom, open the door," Andrew yelled. I finished making myself a cup of chamomile tea, the first one I'd made just for myself in months, and walked slowly to the front door. Through the leaded glass, I could see their agitated, confused silhouettes. "Mom, please open up. We don't know what happened to the locks." Andrew sounded desperate. I opened the door but kept the security chain on, leaving only a narrow gap through which they could see me. "The locks work perfectly," I told them calmly. "I simply changed the keys." "You changed the keys?" Paige looked furious. "Are you crazy? This is our house." "No, Paige, this is my house. And from now on, only people I invite are allowed to enter." "Mom, please don't be ridiculous." Andrew tried to sound calm. "Open the door. We can talk about whatever's bothering you, but don't leave us out here like criminals. Criminals? I laughed. What an interesting word, especially coming from someone who stole nearly $3 million from his mother's bank accounts. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the birds seemed to have stopped chirping. Mom, you went to the bank? Andrew's voice was barely a whisper. I went to the bank. I spoke with the manager. I reviewed all the transactions. I saw all the transfers you made with my money. I saw all the forged signatures. I know everything, Andrew. Paige started pounding on the door with her fists. Open this door right now. I have a right to be in there. My kids are inside. Your children are at school until 6, and when they get here, they can come in to see their grandmother. But you and Andrew no longer live here. You can't kick us out, Paige screamed. Andrew is your son. We're family. Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't lie. Family doesn't try to put their mothers in nursing homes to steal their inheritance. Andrew slumped against the door. Mom, please. We can explain everything. We can fix it. We'll give the money back. We'll change things. We'll start over. Not anymore, son. Not anymore. I closed the door and locked all the bolts. Their yelling and pleading continued for over an hour, but I sat in my living room in my favorite armchair that had belonged to my mother, drinking my chamomile tea and feeling, for the first time in months, that I was home, in my house, in my living room, with my money, with my dignity. When the children got home from school, I opened the door for them immediately. Grandma! Dylan ran to hug me. Mom and Dad are outside and they're really mad. They said you won't let them in. That's right, sweetie. Your dad and mom aren't going to live here anymore. Why? Asked Sophie with tears in her eyes. Because sometimes adults make choices that hurt other people. And when that happens, there are consequences. Do we have to leave too? I sat them both on the sofa and took their hands. You are my grandchildren. This house will always be your home. But your mom and dad will have to find another place to live. Is it because of something bad they did? Yes, sweetie. Something very bad. That night, after I'd made dinner for the children and helped them with their homework, after I'd given them baths and tucked them into their beds for the first time in months, I sat in my reclaimed bedroom. The queen-sized bed Arthur and I had shared for decades felt huge without him. But it no longer felt empty. It felt like mine. On the nightstand was our wedding photograph and the handwritten note I had found in the office. I picked up the note and read it again. Don't let them convince you that you have no rights. This house is yours. The money is yours. The company is yours. You decide what to do with it all. For the first time since his death, I felt that Arthur would be proud of me. For the first time in months, I slept soundly through the night. The next 3 days were a strange mix of peace and tension. During the day, I cared for my grandchildren with a tranquility I hadn't felt in months. I took them to the park. We cooked together. We did homework at the dining room table without any rush or interruptions. In the afternoons, Andrew and Paige would appear at the door like desperate ghosts, ringing the bell, yelling, pleading. I no longer answered. On Thursday morning, while Dylan and Sophie were eating cereal with fresh milk that I had bought with my own money, the phone rang. It was Brian Sterling. Mrs. Morrison, I hope I'm not disturbing you. My father would like to meet you in person. Would it be possible for you to join us for lunch tomorrow? We have some important matters to discuss with you regarding the business he had with Mr. Morrison. Of course, Mr. Sterling. It would be my pleasure. Excellent. If it's all right with you, we'll pick you up at noon. And Mrs. Morrison, my father is very concerned about your situation. I think he's going to have some interesting proposals for you. That afternoon, after dropping the kids off at my neighbor Mrs. Peterson's house so they could do their homework without interruption, I came back to a nasty surprise. Paige had managed to climb over the backyard wall and was sitting in one of the patio chairs, smoking a cigarette as if she owned the place. "Hello, mother-in-law," she said with a venomous smile when she saw me come out the kitchen door. "We need to talk. We have nothing to talk about, Paige. And you're trespassing on my property." "Your property?" She laughed bitterly. "Lucy, dear, I don't think you understand the real situation. Yes, maybe the papers are in your name, but Andrew is your son, your only son. Do you really think you're going to ruin his life over a jealous old woman's tantrum? A tantrum? Stealing almost $3 million from me is cause for a tantrum? We didn't steal anything from you. We used family money for family expenses. For the kids, for the house, for everyone's future. Isn't that what Arthur would have wanted? She got up from the chair and walked toward me with slow, calculated steps, like a predator approaching its prey. Besides, think about it. If you press charges against Andrew, he'll go to jail. And what will happen to Dylan and Sophie? Do you want them to grow up knowing their grandmother put their dad in prison? Do you want to be the evil witch of their story? Her words hurt, because I knew she was partly right. The children would suffer. But I also knew I couldn't let her emotionally blackmail me. The children will be fine. With me. With you? Paige let out a cruel laugh. Lucy, please. You're a woman of almost 60, with no job, no experience raising children alone. Do you think any judge is going to give you custody of 2 minors when there are young, capable parents available? Parents who are criminals. Parents who made a mistake trying to secure their children's future. Very different from being career criminals. She got closer, so close I could smell her expensive perfume mixed with the scent of the cigarette. But it doesn't have to come to that, dear mother-in-law. We can fix this easily. We'll pay the money back, little by little, with interest if you want. Andrew will find another job. We'll move into a smaller house. And you can stay here, in your house, with all the comforts. Only now, with respect. With the place you deserve as the matriarch of the family. And in return? In return, you don't file a report. Everything stays in the family. The children still have their dad, you still have your son, and we all live in peace. I was quiet for a long moment, considering her proposal. It was tempting, I admit. The idea of getting my family back, of the children not suffering, of everything going back to the way it was, but better. And how do I know you won't do it again? How do I know I can trust you? Because you wouldn't give us the chance. You maintain control of all the accounts, all the documents. We would just be living here under your terms. It was a smart offer. Paige had thought of everything, a solution that allowed all of us to save face and move on. But there was one problem. I was no longer the same woman I had been 3 days ago. I was no longer the Lucy who settled for scraps of respect in exchange for family peace. No, I said simply. No, Paige. I don't accept your proposal. Her mask of civility fell instantly. Are you crazy? I'm offering you everything you wanted. Respect, dignity, control of your house. You're offering me an upgraded version of the same lie. You live here under my conditions until you find another way to manipulate me. You pay the money back little by little until I forget or die and you keep everything. That's not true, isn't it? Tell me something, Paige. In these 3 days that you've been out of the house, have you looked for work? Have you looked for a place to live? Have you done anything to solve your situation independently? Her silence was answer enough. You've been waiting for me to give in. You've been counting on my love for my grandchildren being stronger than my self-respect. And you were right. Until 3 days ago. Lucy, think carefully. I have. The answer is no. Paige threw her cigarette on the ground and stomped it out furiously. Fine. If you want a war, you'll get one. But I'm warning you. We have cards to play too. What do you mean? I mean you're not the only one who can do research. We know things too. We know, for example, that Arthur's construction company had some tax issues, incomplete filings, irregular invoices. Things the IRS would be very interested in. My blood ran cold. Arthur had handled the company's taxes for years. If there were irregularities, as his heir, I would be responsible. We also know that there are some properties Arthur bought with cash, without fully reporting its origin. It's called money laundering. Very serious. Arthur was human, Lucy. And like all businessmen, sometimes he took shortcuts. If we talk to the IRS, if we start making noise about these irregularities, well, let's just say your beautiful inheritance could turn into a very big problem, very quickly. The threat was clear. If I accused them of fraud, they would accuse me of tax evasion and money laundering. So I'm going to give you 24 hours to reconsider my offer, Paige continued, walking toward the garden gate. I want an answer by this time tomorrow, and I hope it's the right one. She left as she had come, climbing over the back wall like a thief in the night. I couldn't sleep that night. Paige's threats spun in my head like a broken record. Was it true that Arthur had committed tax fraud? Was it possible that by inheriting his assets, I had also inherited his legal problems? At 3 in the morning, I decided to call Mr. Mendoza, my lawyer. I knew it was late, but this was an emergency. Mr. Mendoza, I apologize for the hour, but I need to consult with you urgently about my husband's legal situation. Tell me, Mrs. Morrison. I told him everything. Paige's threats, the accusations of tax problems, the possibility of irregularities in the construction company. Mrs. Morrison, let me reassure you, before taking your case, I thoroughly investigated the tax history of your husband and his company. Mr. Morrison was meticulously honest in his filings. Yes, like any businessman, he took advantage of available legal deductions, but there was never anything irregular or illegal. Are you sure? Completely. In fact, Mr. Morrison paid more in taxes than he legally owed on several occasions. His records are impeccable. And what about the properties bought with cash? All of them were perfectly documented and declared. Your husband meticulously kept all receipts, all sources of income. There is nothing to worry about. The relief I felt was immense. So, Paige's threats are baseless? Entirely. In fact, if she files false accusations with the IRS, she herself could face charges for filing a false report and defamation. I hung up the phone feeling strong again. Paige had played her last card, and it was a bluff. The next morning, I woke up early, dressed in my best gray pantsuit, the one I used to wear for important meetings when I worked at the stationery store, and waited for the Sterlings to arrive. George Sterling was a man in his 70s, elegant and distinguished, with intelligent eyes that immediately reminded me of Arthur. He arrived with Brian in a navy blue Mercedes that shone under the midday sun. Mrs. Morrison, he said, taking my hands in his, you have no idea how much I've wanted to meet you. Arthur spoke so highly of you. I feel like we're already old friends. During lunch at one of the most elegant restaurants in Scottsdale, George told me stories of his friendship with my husband that made me laugh and cry at the same time. But toward the end of the meal, the conversation took a more serious turn. Mrs. Morrison, Brian told me about your family situation. It is deplorable, unforgivable. It has been difficult, Mr. Sterling. I can imagine. But I've come to offer you something that I hope can help. As you know, Arthur and I had several projects together. Projects that were left unfinished when he passed. I would like to invite you to be my partner in the most important real estate development of my career. He showed me blueprints and photographs of a luxury residential complex in Laguna Beach, California. The initial investment would be $5 million. Your return in 18 months would be $15 million. But more important than the money, Mrs. Morrison, would be the honor of working with the widow of my dear friend. $15 million. Enough money to secure my future and my grandchildren's forever. It's a very generous proposal, Mr. Sterling, but I need time to think about it. Of course, but not too much time. These opportunities don't wait. When I returned home that afternoon, Paige was already waiting for me in the front yard, sitting on the hood of a rental car. Time's up, mother-in-law. What's your answer? I looked at her for a long moment, remembering everything I had suffered, everything I had lost, everything I had regained. My answer is very simple, Paige. First thing tomorrow, I am filing the criminal report against Andrew. And if you make a single false accusation against my husband's memory, I will sue you for defamation, and I will destroy you financially. Her face fell completely. Lucy, you can't do this. We're family. The family ended the day you decided to rob me. That night, after putting the children to bed, I sat in Arthur's office with a glass of the red wine he saved for special occasions. On the desk, I had the police report documents ready to sign, the blueprints for the Laguna Beach project, and our wedding photo. For the first time since Arthur died, I felt completely free. The next day, I would file the report. Andrew would face the consequences of his actions. Paige would learn that not all older women are easy victims. And I would begin a new life as an independent businesswoman, a partner of one of the most important developers in the country. Arthur would be proud. On Monday morning, I woke up with a strange feeling, as if something was out of place. The children had slept with me in the queen bed after Dylan had a nightmare about Daddy in a dark jail. Their little bodies breathed peacefully beside me. but I couldn't shake the unease gnawing at my stomach. I went down to the kitchen to make breakfast and found a white envelope slipped under the front door. My name was written in Andrew's shaky handwriting, and for a moment my heart softened, thinking it might be a sincere apology, a final plea from a repentant son. But when I opened the envelope, what I found took my breath away. They were photographs. Photographs of me going in and out of the bank, talking to the manager, leaving the lawyer's office. Photographs of George and Brian Sterling picking me up for lunch. Photographs of me signing documents at the restaurant. On the back of each photo, in Paige's handwriting, were comments written in red marker. Lucy Morrison conspiring with strangers to defraud her family. Senile elderly woman manipulated by con artists trying to steal her inheritance. 60-year-old woman lacking the mental capacity to handle major financial decisions. And at the bottom of the envelope, a typewritten note. Dear mother-in-law. As you can see, we know how to document things too. These photographs, along with testimony from concerned witnesses, who will attest to your erratic and paranoid behavior in recent weeks, will be very useful when we file for a conservatorship in family court. A sympathetic judge will understand that a grieving widow, traumatized by her husband's death, is vulnerable to manipulation by unscrupulous strangers looking to seize her assets. Custody of the children, of course, will be granted to their biological parents, who have proven to be responsible and protective. You have until 3 o'clock this afternoon to reconsider your position. After that time, the documents will be filed with the proper authorities. With love, your loving daughter-in-law. My hands shook so much the photographs fell to the tile floor. The sheer scale of their betrayal hit me like a punch to the gut. They hadn't just planned to steal my money. Now they wanted to declare me mentally incompetent to take my grandchildren away from me too. A conservatorship. The words echoed in my head like a death knell. In the United States, a conservatorship meant losing all my rights. I couldn't manage my money. I couldn't make medical decisions. I couldn't live alone. I couldn't even choose my own clothes without the supervision of a legal guardian. And that legal guardian would be Andrew. I sat on the kitchen floor, among the scattered photographs, and for the first time in days, I cried again. But these weren't tears of self-pity. They were tears of pure rage, of an indignation so deep it burned inside me like acid. How had they come to this? How had my son, the baby I had held in my arms for entire nights when he had colic, reached the point of wanting to completely destroy me? The sound of small footsteps on the stairs pulled me out of my spiral of pain. Dylan appeared in the kitchen in his pajamas, rubbing his eyes with his little fists. Grandma, why are you crying? Does something hurt? I quickly dried my tears and gathered the photographs from the floor. It's nothing, sweetie. It's just that sometimes adults get sad. Is it because Mom and Dad are still mad at you? The innocence in his question broke my heart. How could I explain to an 8-year-old that his parents were trying to destroy his grandmother? It's complicated, Dylan, but I want you to know that no matter what happens, I will always love you and your sister. Are they going to separate us? The question pierced me like a spear. At only 8 years old, Dylan already sensed that something terrible was about to happen. I won't let them, I said. And as I spoke those words, I knew I would do anything to keep that promise. After having breakfast with the children and leaving them to watch cartoons, I locked myself in Arthur's office and called Mr. Mendoza. Mr. Mendoza, I need to see you urgently. There have been serious complications. Of course, Mrs. Morrison. Can you be at my office in an hour? I'll be there. I brought him the photographs and Paige's note. The lawyer reviewed them with a furrowed brow, adjusting his glasses whenever he found something particularly disturbing. Mrs. Morrison, this is very serious. A conservatorship hearing can be extremely dangerous, especially if they have witnesses willing to testify against you. But it's ridiculous. I am perfectly sane. Any psychological evaluation would prove that. Of course you're sane. But these hearings aren't always based on objective evaluations. If they can present a convincing case that you've been the victim of manipulation, that you've made irrational financial decisions, that your behavior has been erratic. So what can I do? We need to act immediately. First, we are going to file a criminal complaint for extortion against your daughter-in-law. This letter constitutes a direct threat. Second, We need to get independent psychological and medical evaluations to certify your mental capacity. Third, we need to prepare for what could be a very dirty fight. I left the lawyer's office feeling like I was walking on quicksand. Every step I took forward sank me deeper into a legal swamp I didn't fully understand, but there was something else I needed to do. I called George Sterling. Mr. Sterling, I need to speak with you urgently about the situation with my family. Complications have arisen that could affect our potential partnership. Come to my office immediately, Mrs. Morrison, and bring all the documentation related to these complications. George Sterling's office took up the entire 20th floor of one of the most imposing skyscrapers in Phoenix. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city that would have taken my breath away under normal circumstances. But that day, I could only focus on the crisis that was destroying my life. George read Paige's letter with an expression that hardened with every word. "This is despicable," he muttered. "Absolutely despicable. Mr. Sterling, I understand if you'd prefer not to partner with me. My family situation is complicated." "Are you kidding?" He looked at me in disbelief. "Mrs. Morrison, what they are doing to you is not just a personal attack. It's an attack on the memory of my dear friend Arthur. It's an attack on the family values our generation stood for our entire lives." He stood up from his desk and walked to the window, contemplating the city with his hands clasped behind his back. "Besides, I've been looking into your daughter-in-law since our lunch on Friday. Paige has an interesting history." "What kind of history?" "The kind that explains why she's so desperate to get money quickly." George opened a folder on his desk and showed me several documents. "Paige has over $500,000 in gambling debts to an illegal bookie in Las Vegas. Debts that, according to my sources, must be paid by the end of the month, or the consequences will be unpleasant." My blood ran cold. Gambling debts. The explanation for everything was starting to take shape. "There's more. Your son Andrew doesn't know it, but Paige has been selling jewelry and valuables from the house to pay the interest on the debt. She even sold Arthur's gold watch, the one you gave him for your 25th wedding anniversary." Arthur's watch, my most precious gift to him. She had sold it like it was scrap metal. She has also been having an affair with the bookie, a man named Vince Moretti. It seems the relationship started as a way to get more credit for her bets, but it has become complicated. George showed me photographs of Paige entering and leaving a hotel with an older, swarthy man wearing gold chains and flashy clothes. Vince Moretti is not exactly a patient man when it comes to collecting debts. If Paige doesn't get the money soon, she and your family could be in real physical danger. It all fit. Paige's desperation, her aggression, her determination to get my money at any cost. It wasn't just greed. It was survival. Does my son know any of this? I don't think so. According to my investigators, Andrew genuinely believes he's helping to secure his family's financial future. Paige has manipulated him as expertly as she has you. I was silent for several minutes, processing all this information. My son wasn't the villain of this story. He was another of Paige's victims, just like me. "Mr. Sterling, what do you suggest I do?" "I suggest we play by their rules, Mrs. Morrison. They have decided to make this conflict public and dirty. We can be just as public and far more effective." "What do you mean?" George smiled for the first time since I'd arrived, but it was a cold, calculating smile. "I mean that tomorrow morning, before Paige can file her conservatorship petition, we are going to file a criminal complaint against her for extortion, fraud, and child endangerment for exposing minors to dangerous criminals. And Andrew, we are going to offer your son a way out. If he cooperates with us, if he testifies against Paige, if he files for divorce immediately and seeks counseling, we will not press charges against him. He can retain custody of the children and start a new life free from that woman's toxic influence." The proposal was tempting, but something in my gut churned. Using the same dirty tactics they had used on me felt like a betrayal of my own values. "And if he doesn't cooperate? Then he will face criminal charges as well. And you will file for full custody of the children on the grounds that both parents are convicted felons." That night, back at home, I tucked the children in early and sat on the back patio with a glass of wine, watching the stars that Arthur and I used to observe from those same chairs during our first years of marriage. On the table, I had 3 folders: the extortion complaint against Paige, the the psychological evaluation certifying my mental competence, and the business proposal from George Sterling that could change my life forever. I also had my phone, with Andrew's number keyed in, but I hadn't called. A part of me wanted to call him, to explain everything I had discovered about Paige, to give him a chance to walk away from her before it was too late. He was my son, after all, my only son. But another part of me, the part that had been humiliated and betrayed for months, wanted him to face the consequences of his choices without my intervention. At 10 o'clock, I made a decision. I dialed Andrew's number. "Mom." His voice sounded surprised. "Are you okay?" "Andrew, I need you to come to the house. Now. Alone. Not Paige." "Mom, I already told you that." "Andrew, either you come alone in the next 30 minutes, or tomorrow morning both you and Paige will be facing felony charges that will put you in prison for years. Your choice." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "I'm on my way." I hung up and waited. It was time for my son to learn the whole truth about the woman he had chosen over his own mother. And it was time for him to choose, once and for all, which side of this war he wanted to be on. Andrew arrived exactly 29 minutes after my call. I watched him through the living room window, walking slowly up the garden path like a man on his way to the gallows. He had lost weight in the last few weeks, and the dark circles under his eyes had deepened until they looked like bruises. I opened the door before he could knock. "Come in," I said simply. He sat on the couch where he had grown up watching Saturday morning cartoons, where he had done his high school homework, where Arthur and I had given him the lecture about drugs when he turned 15. But now he looked like a stranger in his own childhood home. "Mom, I know things have gotten out of control. Andrew, before you say anything else, you need to see this." I placed the photographs of Paige with Vince Moretti on the coffee table. His face fell completely as he saw the first image. What is this?" "Your wife with her lover, the owner of an illegal gambling ring in Las Vegas." The documents about the gambling debts followed, the sold jewelry, his father's watch turned into cash for lost bets. Andrew took each document with trembling hands, reading in silence as his world crumbled piece by piece. "This can't be true," he murmured. "Paige told me she sold a few things because we needed money for the kids' expenses. $500,000 in gambling debts, Andrew. And according to my sources, if she doesn't pay by the end of the month, she and all of you will be in real danger." My son buried his face in his hands. "Oh my God, what have I done? What have we done? You tried to steal my inheritance to pay your wife's gambling debts. You forged legal documents. You planned to have me declared mentally incompetent. You put my grandchildren at risk by exposing them to dangerous criminals. Mom, I didn't know about any of this. I swear on Dad's memory. I didn't know about the gambling, the affair, the debts. But you did know about the bank fraud. You did know about the forged documents. You did know you were robbing me." Andrew nodded slowly, unable to look me in the eye. "Paige convinced me it was for the best. She told me you didn't have experience handling that much money, that you could get scammed, that it was our responsibility to protect you, and treating me like a servant was part of protecting me. That was Paige's idea. She said if we kept you busy, you wouldn't think about the money so much, that you'd feel useful. And planning to put me in a nursing home was also to protect me." Andrew broke down completely. Tears streamed down his face as his body shook with sobs that seemed to come from the depths of his soul. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened to me. I don't know how I let it get to this." I watched him cry for several minutes, feeling a strange mix of pain and compassion. He was my son, my baby, but he was also the man who had participated in the systematic destruction of my dignity. "Do you love her?" I finally asked. "Paige? I don't know. I thought I did, but now, seeing all this, I don't know if I ever really knew the woman I married. Do you love your children? More than my own life? Then you listen to me very carefully, Andrew. You have one chance to save yourself. Just one." I explained George Sterling's proposal. Cooperate with the authorities, divorce Paige, seek counseling, and start a new life. If you do this, I won't press charges against you. You can keep custody of the children. You can rebuild your life. And if I don't, then tomorrow morning, Both you and Paige will be arrested. The children will be placed in my custody, and you will spend the next several years in prison." Andrew was silent for so long I thought he had fallen asleep. Finally, he lifted his head. "Could you ever forgive me?" The question completely disarmed me. For months I had fantasized about this moment, imagined telling him everything I had felt, all the pain he had caused me. But now, with him in front of me, broken and repentant, all I felt was tired. "I don't know, Andrew, but I know I want to try. For Dylan and Sophie, for your father's memory, for what we once were as a family. What do you need me to do?" For the next 2 hours, we planned everything. Andrew would go home, pack the children's bags, and tell Paige he was leaving with them for a few days to think things over. He wouldn't say a word about what we had discovered. The next morning, he would go to Mr. Mendoza's office to sign a full affidavit about the fraud. Then, he would go straight to file for divorce. What do I tell Paige when she realizes I'm gone? Nothing. Let her worry. Let her feel what it's like when someone you love disappears without an explanation. Andrew left at 2 in the morning. I hugged him at the door, and for a moment, he was my little boy again, asking for forgiveness for breaking something valuable. But he had broken more than an object. He had broken my trust, and that was going to take much longer to heal. A week later, sitting on the terrace of my new home in Laguna Beach, watching the sunset over the Pacific Ocean, I received a call from George Sterling. "Mrs. Morrison, I have excellent news. Paige was arrested this morning. In addition to the extortion and fraud charges, the authorities found evidence she was helping Vince Moretti launder money through fake transactions. And Vince Moretti? Arrested as well. Apparently, Paige's gambling debts were just the tip of the iceberg. There was a whole money laundering operation running through his bookmaking business." I leaned back in my beach chair, feeling as though an enormous weight had been lifted from my shoulders. How long will they be in prison? Paige will likely get between 8 and 12 years. Moretti could face life for organized crime. I hung up and called to the children, who were building sandcastles on the private beach of my new home. Dylan and Sophie had been surprisingly resilient. After the first few weeks of confusion and tears, they had begun to adjust to their new life. Andrew visited them every weekend, and little by little, we were rebuilding something that resembled a functional family. Andrew had kept his word. He had divorced Paige, started therapy, and found an honest job at an accounting firm. He was no longer the arrogant, manipulated man who had lived in my house during those terrible months. He was someone new, someone who was learning to live with the consequences of his choices, but also with the possibility of redemption. 2 months after moving to Laguna Beach, George Sterling officially became my business partner. The real estate project was exceeding all projections, and my initial $5 million investment had already doubled. But more important than the money was the sense of purpose I had regained. For the first time in decades, I woke up every morning excited for the day ahead. I had business meetings, important decisions to make, creative projects to oversee. I was a businesswoman. I was independent. I was free. One afternoon, while reviewing the architectural plans for the project's second phase in my Ocean View office, I had an unexpected visitor. Brian Sterling appeared at the door with a shy smile and a bouquet of wildflowers. "Mrs. Morrison, I hope I'm not disturbing you, but I was wondering if you would like to have dinner with me tonight." I looked at him, surprised. Brian was a handsome, intelligent man, just a few years younger than me, but it had been so long since I'd thought of myself as a woman, as someone who could be desirable to another person, that the invitation caught me completely off guard. "Dinner? With me?" "With you," he smiled. "I've been wanting to ask you for weeks, but I didn't know how. You are an extraordinary woman, Mrs. Morrison. Strong, intelligent, elegant. I would like to get to know you better." I blushed like a teenager. 6 months ago, I was sleeping in a laundry room, feeling invisible and useless. Now, a successful, attractive man was asking me to dinner. "I would love that," I said. That night, having dinner at a restaurant overlooking the ocean, wearing a blue dress I had bought the week before simply because I liked how I looked in it, I realized I had done something I didn't think was possible 6 months ago. I had been reborn. I was not the same Lucy who had lost Arthur. I was not the humiliated woman who had lived like a servant in her own house. I was not the frightened victim who discovered her family was robbing her. I was someone entirely new. Someone who had taken the worst life had thrown at her and transformed it into strength. Someone who had turned betrayal into wisdom, pain into power, loss into freedom. As Brian told me stories of his travels through Europe and I told him about my plans to expand the real estate business, I realized that for the first time in my adult life, I was having a conversation with a man as an equal, not as a wife, not as a mother, not as a subordinate, as Lucy, as myself. At the end of the dinner, when Brian walked me to my door, he gently took my hand. "Mrs. Morrison, Lucy, may I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you regret fighting so hard to get your life back?" "Regret it?" I laughed softly. "Brian, what I went through these past few months was the best thing that could have happened to me." "The best thing?" "It taught me who I really am. It taught me what I'm capable of. It taught me that I should never, ever allow anyone to treat me as less than I'm worth." "And what are you worth, Lucy?" I looked out at the ocean, where the full moon created a silver path on the waves, and I smiled. "More than I ever imagined." 6 months later, as I watched Dylan and Sophie run along the beach of our home, as I reviewed the financial statements of our second real estate project, as I planned my weekend trip to Madrid with Brian, I wondered if I had ever been truly happy before. The answer surprised me. I had been content, satisfied. I had fulfilled my roles as a wife and mother, but happy, genuinely happy with myself, with my life, with my decisions. That was new. This was what it meant to be reborn. Not to go back to who you were, but to become who you always had the potential to be. And in the end, when they froze the family trust thinking they had me trapped, they never imagined they were setting me free. They never imagined the groom's father would call me to fly with him on his private jet. Not toward a new dependency, but toward my own freedom. Have you ever experienced something like this? Do you know someone who has been through a similar situation? Tell me your experience in the comments. If this story touched your heart, give it a like and subscribe to the channel so this message can reach someone who might need to hear it today.